This video goes over the basic mechanics of saving, but at the same time how we think about saving in the industry so we don't lose things like data and how we don't pack up our hard drives. When it comes to saving in ZBrush, especially when you first start out, things can be a little bit confusing. You'll probably see a save as up here, and also at the same time a file save as, something that would be similar to if you were saving like a Word document or a Photoshop file. Also, you might have found in documents there's also a save. So all these save features, what do they do and how can I use them without losing my work? So when you start, you'll be working on kind of like an individual 3D asset, and that might be comprised of individual subtools. So maybe it's a character with floating eyes and things like that. One thing to note is that whenever you're working on something, up here under the tool selection, so this would be called a tool, something's highlighted. You'll see that there's multiple tools that we can highlight, and that can be kind of scary because when you click on each one you think that your asset's gone, but fundamentally they're still here under a file. The reason that basically works out is that when you're on a project, you might be working on individual things, maybe like a button that you can bring into your current tool. And it also helps just like break down the project. So when you first come in and say you want to save this, the safest method is coming up to File and then clicking Save As. What this is going to do is save something called project, and then up here you can see where it says Save Project. Name it, put it in a fantastic place so you can reference it later. So whenever you're saving a project, what that's going to do, it's going to save all the assets here, so the ones that you can switch between. And also at the same time it's going to save all your brush settings, any sort of colors, alphas and materials. So that's really fantastic, and it's safe because it's going to save. You can rest assured that everything's going to be safe here. But at the same time it can be, the files can get quite large in terms of bloating. You don't necessarily want all these brushes all the time. And potentially you don't even want some of these things like the helix. It's just trash that you were using as a tool to make the primary thing that you were making. So if that's the case, and you want some smaller files and more of like an iterative saving pattern, what you can do is save tool. So save as tool, what that's going to do, it's only going to save the tool that you have selected. So say for example I wanted to save these cylinders. If I come to save tool this time, which is up here under the tools, and save as, you can see that it's saving as a Z tool. Now when I save that, what it's going to do is it's only going to save this one that I've got highlighted. It's not going to save the other ones, and also it's not going to save any of my brushes. So if you're just working and interested in an individual object, this is the way to go. And then it's also going to save all your subtools. But if you're looking at a wider sense of a project, maybe you're switching between tools and making things like boots and laces, and then making on a separate Z tool the main character, you'd want to be using the File and Save As. With the fundamentals out the way, I really want to show how we'd sort of use that in the industry and things to think about. So when you are saving a tool, that's obviously going to be less data. It's usually derived from how many polygons you've got up here. So if you've got a massive project, sometimes when you're saving a project it can get into the 2 GB, 4 GB realm. So when you're making characters or developing on anything, you usually have iterations, so something that you can go back to at a later date, depending, just to see your timeline, or maybe you made a mistake that you can go back to. So you can see a problem that when you have about 4 GB per file, you start to bloat your hard drive. So if you've got a really big hard drive, that's great. But maybe if you're a student, you can't afford masses and masses of hard drives. You've got to think about this sort of management and how that fits into your workflows. So if I was developing on a character or making some sort of asset, what I would be doing, maybe potentially every couple of hours, would be coming up to Save As, depending if I have other things. Say I'm just working on this cylinder, I'd come on Save As, and then I'd call it something, so let's call it Classic QWERTY, and after that I'd put an iteration number. So I might put iteration number 1, and then obviously maybe an hour later or the next day when I make a substantial change, I'll call it iteration 2. Also at the same time, you might be more comfortable saving the files, but what I would suggest is try and keep them clean before you save them. These things are going to build up over time. So say you've got maybe 2 things here that I'm interested in, which is my main tool, the one I've got selected, and maybe I was making something in in the spheres, and so I really want these tools, but potentially I've got other tools here which are going to bloat my file. But I do want to save the file. So the way you can get rid of that is just selecting them and then coming to delete. Basically, this is going to clean out your project so that when you save it, you're not saving all these unnecessary millions and millions of polygons, and then you can take the advantages of like iterative saving. Also, another tip for this is if you don't want to be saving all the time, you can press 9 on the keyboard, and basically what that's going to do is do an autosave, which is put into the directories of ZBrush. You can also redirect them. I'd suggest looking on Google on how you can do that. So if you're ever worrying, you can just press 9 for the autosave to understand that it's kind of like backed up. If you're thinking of an iterative milestone, you're going to save it either as a tool or as a project, depending on your needs. But if it is a project, you want to be thinking about optimizing it and sort of like cleaning up.